Why did the applause die before it ever fully began? The bleachers were packed, sun flashing off polished shoes and pressed uniforms, families leaning forward with phones already raised. It was supposed to be loud, joyful, predictable, but something fractured the rhythm of the moment before anyone could name it. A hesitation, a pause that rippled through the air like a held breath. Claire Donovan felt it before she saw it. She had learned long ago to sense shifts like that, the way rooms changed when danger crept in unseen. She sat in the third row, spine straight, hands folded around a small flag she hadn't realized she was crushing. To everyone else, she was just another mother, mid-40s, simple blue dress, cardigan buttoned too high for the Virginia heat, the kind of woman people smiled at politely and forgot moments later. She had come only to watch her son graduate. Ryan stood on the field with 18 other men, shoulders squared, jaw locked, eyes forward. Months of punishment had carved something harder into him. He looked older than his years, stronger, like he belonged to the uniform in a way that made Claire's chest ache with equal parts pride and fear. She told herself she was ready for this. She had told herself that lie all morning. The band fell silent. The commander stepped forward. Ethan Marshall had the posture of someone who had never learned how to stand casually again. His voice carried without effort, practiced and restrained, shaped by years of speaking over rotor wash and gunfire. He spoke of endurance, of brotherhood, of the cost. Words Claire had heard before, not from a podium but whispered into the dirt while her hands worked blindly inside a man's chest. She forced her focus back to Ryan. This was his moment, not hers. But memories don't ask permission. The sun felt too bright. The smell of cut grass twisted suddenly into dust and cordite. Her fingers tightened. When Ryan's name echoed across the field, something inside her fractured anyway. Pride surged fast and sharp, followed by the familiar undertow of dread. She lifted her hand to her face, brushed at a tear she refused to let fall. Her sleeve slid back. Just an inch. Black ink caught the light. On the podium, Commander Marshall faltered. It was barely perceptible, a half-beat delay, a hitch in his breath, but Claire saw it. She always noticed when men like that went still. His gaze drifted, unfocused at first, then locked. Not on the formation, not on the flags. On her. A cold weight settled in her stomach. For years she had lived carefully, sleeves long, questions deflected, stories shortened until they fit comfortably inside other people's expectations. She had buried the past under scrubs and night shifts and school lunches. She had done it to survive. She had done it for Ryan. Marshall's eyes narrowed. Recognition sharpened his expression, carving through ceremony and protocol like a blade. Claire knew that look. She had seen it in mirrors, in the eyes of men who suddenly realized the ground beneath them wasn't what they thought. The microphone crackled, silence spread. Marshall set his notes aside. The sound of his boots on the platform was measured, deliberate. He stepped down. Confusion rippled through the crowd, whispers swelling and breaking against one another. Claire's pulse thudded in her ears. She wanted to pull her sleeve back down, to disappear into the anonymity she had earned. But it was too late. The past had found her. He stopped in front of her. "Ma'am," he said quietly, though his voice carried, "would you stand, please?" Every instinct screamed no. Standing meant exposure. Standing meant the end of the careful life she had built from fragments. Standing meant her son would see her, finally, not as she had chosen to be, but as she once was. Her legs felt heavy as she rose. The cardigan slipped open. There was no hiding the ink now. Numbers, symbols, the unmistakable geometry of a life lived too close to death. Marshall inhaled sharply. Then his posture changed, not into authority, but into something closer to reverence. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, voice steady but altered, "this ceremony will pause for a moment." Ryan's head turned. Confusion flickered across his face as his eyes found hers. She saw the question forming, the fracture beginning. Marshall gestured toward her. I want you to meet Hospital Corpsman First Class Claire Donovan, United States Navy, retired. The name moved through the crowd like a shockwave. Murmurs surged, then fell into stunned quiet. Some of the older men stiffened. A few faces went pale with recognition. Claire felt the weight of eyes pressing into her skin, but she kept her chin level. She had learned how to stand in worse places than this. Ryan stared. The world tilted. Commander Marshall turned back toward the field, his voice carrying memory now, not formality. You see a mother today. I see the reason I'm still alive. The air thickened. Claire's chest tightened. Fallujah, 2007, Highway Phoenix. His words landed with precision. Our convoy was hit, multiple IEDs. We were pinned in the open, 11 men bleeding out. We were done. Images flared unbidden behind Claire's eyes, heat shimmering off wreckage, screams swallowed by gunfire, her hands slick and shaking as she worked without thinking. She swallowed hard. One medic, Marshall continued, moved through that fire for 5 hours. She took shrapnel. She kept going. She cut, stitched, packed wounds in the dirt. She called medevac under direct fire. Every one of us lived. A breath shuddered through the crowd. Ryan's face drained of color. His mouth opened, then closed. He looked at her like he was trying to reconcile two incompatible truths. Claire met his gaze and held it. She didn't apologize. She didn't explain. Not yet. She didn't do it for medals, Marshall said. She did it because that's who she is. He turned to Ryan. Son, your mother is a legend, whether she wanted that title or not. Something broke in Ryan's eyes. Pride warred with disbelief, with hurt. Claire felt it like a knife, sharp and deserved. She had hidden this not out of shame, but out of love. She had wanted his path to be his own. She had wanted him free of her shadow. Marshall raised a hand, quieting the crowd. Doc Donovan set the standard. She showed us what courage looks like when no one is watching. He faced her again. Would you come up here? Her heart sank. She had never wanted a stage. She had always done her best work in the margins, in the dark, but refusal would cheapen what had already been revealed. Slowly, she walked forward. Her dress was plain, her shoes unremarkable, but the space seemed to bend around her anyway. Silence followed each step. Marshall read from his phone, voice stripped bare as he recited the citation. Facts, times, numbers, the official language of survival. Claire listened as if it were someone else's life being described. She barely recognized herself in the words. When he handed her the microphone, it felt heavier than any rifle she had carried. She took a breath. Gentlemen, she said, her voice calm, practiced. What you've endured here matters, but it's not the point. 19 men leaned forward. This uniform doesn't make you brave. Your choices will. She turned to Ryan. His eyes were wet now, unguarded. I'm proud of you, she said simply. Your father would be too. The crowd erupted then, sound crashing back into the world. Claire stepped away, returning to her seat before the noise could touch her. She wanted only to breathe. Ryan came to her immediately after. His voice shook. Why didn't you tell me? She smiled softly, sadness threaded through it. Because you needed to choose this without me in your ear. He swallowed. I didn't know who you were. She reached for his hand. You knew exactly who I was. That was enough. The sun dipped lower as families reunited, but something fundamental had shifted. Ryan saw her differently now. Not bigger, not smaller, just truer. 6 months later, when he deployed, Claire stood alone in the trauma bay between patients, her tattoo visible beneath rolled sleeves. She no longer hid it. Because courage doesn't announce itself. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. Why did the silence between them feel heavier than any battlefield she'd ever known? Ryan didn't speak as they walked away from the graduation field. Not at first. Families laughed around them, cameras flashing, congratulations spilling freely. But between mother and son, there was a quiet so dense it felt physical. Claire matched his pace, resisting the instinct to fill the space with explanations. She had learned long ago that some truths needed room to breathe before they could be heard. They reached the edge of the parking lot, the noise thinning, the day suddenly ordinary again. Ryan stopped, turned, looked at her the way he used to when he was a boy trying to decide whether to trust the answer he was about to get. "How long?" he asked. Claire didn't pretend not to understand. "Almost 10 years," she said. "Active before you were born, a few after." He exhaled sharply, running a hand through his cropped hair. "You were there, all of it." She nodded. "Enough." That was the first crack. Enough, not everything, never everything. Ryan's jaw tightened. "You watched me train, you watched me struggle. You knew exactly what I was walking into." "Yes," she said quietly. "And you still let me." Claire met his eyes. This was the moment she had feared more than any ambush. "I didn't let you," she said. "You chose it, just like I did." His shoulders slumped, the fight draining out of him, replaced by something more fragile. "I thought I was strong," he admitted. "I thought I was becoming something new. Turns out I was just catching up to you." The words cut deeper than accusation. Claire felt the familiar ache of guilt stir, old, stubborn, never fully healed. "Ryan," she said gently, "you didn't do this to be like me. You did it because something inside you wouldn't let you walk away. That matters." He looked away, blinking hard. Pride flickered there, tangled with hurt. "Dad knew, didn't he?" "Yes." "What did he say?" Claire's throat tightened. Memories surfaced, quiet nights, whispered conversations, the weight of shared understanding. "He said if our son ever chose this life, it would mean he understood the cost, and that understanding was worth more than protection." Ryan nodded slowly, absorbing that. "I wish I'd known." "I know," she replied, "but knowing earlier wouldn't have made it easier. It might have made it heavier." They stood there, two soldiers shaped by different wars, bound by the same one. Eventually, Ryan stepped forward and pulled her into an embrace. It was awkward at first, years of unspoken distance caught between them. But then his arms tightened, and Claire felt the tension give way. "I'm scared," he said into her shoulder, voice barely audible. She closed her eyes. "Good," she whispered. "That means you're paying attention." That night, after the celebrations faded and Ryan returned to base, Claire sat alone in her car, hands resting on the steering wheel. The adrenaline had finally ebbed, leaving exhaustion in its wake. She stared at her reflection in the windshield, older now, lines etched by time and things she didn't talk about. Exposure had changed something, not just for Ryan, for her. The next morning, she rolled up her sleeves at the hospital without thinking. A young corpsman noticed the tattoo and hesitated, curiosity flickering across his face. Claire waited for the familiar instinct to deflect, to minimize. Instead, she met his gaze. "Yes," she said before he could ask. "A long time ago." Word traveled faster than she expected, not as rumor but as recognition. Quiet nods, a pause of respect. She didn't bask in it, it made her uncomfortable, but it also felt honest. Weeks passed. Ryan called when he could, short conversations, surface details. Claire heard the tension beneath his words, the weight of anticipation, the pressure to live up to something newly defined. She resisted the urge to warn him, to soften the edges. Then came the call that changed the tone. "We're deploying," Ryan said. "Task Force Viper." Claire closed her eyes. The name carried echoes, not fear exactly, but awareness. "When?" "2 weeks." She exhaled slowly. "Then you'll spend the next 2 weeks pretending you're ready." A pause, then a soft laugh. "Guess I get that from you." After they hung up, Claire sat alone in the break room, staring at nothing. Anxiety crept in, sharp and unwelcome. She had spent years mastering her own fear. This was different. This was helplessness. The night before his departure, Ryan came home. They sat at the kitchen table where he'd once done homework, the same chipped mug between them. He studied her hands, the scars he'd never noticed before. "Did you ever regret it?" he asked. She considered the question carefully. "Some days," she said, "mostly the days I lost people, but not the choice itself." He nodded. "I keep thinking about what the commander said, about you running toward fire." She smiled faintly. "I didn't feel brave, I felt necessary." Ryan absorbed that. "I hope I can be that." "You will," she said. "Not because of me, because of who you are." When he left the next morning, Claire watched from the porch until his car disappeared. Only then did she allow herself to sit, to feel the weight settle fully into her chest. Months later, the call came in the middle of a shift, not the kind that made your heart stop, but close enough. Ryan's unit had taken casualties. He was safe, for now. Claire finished her shift on autopilot, hands steady, mind racing. That night she lay awake, memories colliding with imagination. She knew the terrain he was in, knew the decisions he would face. And she knew there were no guarantees. Weeks stretched into months. Calls became sporadic. Claire threw herself into mentoring young medics, teaching not just technique but restraint. "You can't save everyone," she told them, "but you can always try to leave no one alone." Then one evening, her phone rang. "Mom," Ryan said, voice low, "I froze today." Her heart clenched. "Tell me." "There was a kid," he continued, "in the wrong place. I hesitated just a second. Someone else stepped in." Silence hung between them. "Did anyone die?" she asked. "No." "Then you learned something," she said gently. "Fear isn't failure, it's information." He let out a shaky breath. "You make it sound simple." "It isn't," she replied, "but it's survivable." When he returned months later, thinner, quieter, changed, Claire recognized the look in his eyes immediately. The weight of having seen too much too soon. They didn't talk much at first. They didn't need to. One evening, Ryan broke the silence. "I get it now," he said, "why you never talked about it." Claire nodded. "Some things lose their meaning when spoken." He looked at her, something like peace settling in his expression. "I'm glad they saw you that day." She raised an eyebrow. "Why?" "Because I needed to know," he said. "Not who you were, but that it's possible to carry all that and still come home." Claire felt hope stir, quiet, fragile, real. She had never wanted to be a symbol, but if her story helped her son understand his own path, then maybe exposure had been worth the cost. Because strength isn't inherited. It's learned. Why did the quiet after his return feel more dangerous than the silence before a firefight? Ryan came home without ceremony. No band, no crowd, just a duffel bag dropped by the door and a hug that lasted a second longer than either of them expected. Claire felt it immediately, the shift in his weight, the way his eyes scanned rooms without permission, the pause before he answered simple questions. It was subtle, almost invisible, but she knew it the way medics know when bleeding is internal. He was alive. That was the victory everyone else celebrated. But survival carried its own cost. The first few days passed gently. Too gently. Ryan helped around the house, fixed a loose cabinet hinge, went for long runs before dawn. At night, Claire heard him packing the hallway, bare feet against hardwood, back and forth like he was walking a perimeter no one else could see. She didn't confront him, not yet. One evening she found him sitting on the porch steps, staring into the dark. A beer sweated untouched beside him. "You're mapping exits," she said softly. He didn't look surprised. "Habit." She sat next to him, close enough to feel the tension humming under his skin. "You don't have to do that here." "I know," he said, then after a beat, "but my body doesn't." There it was, the truth without armor. Claire nodded. "It takes time for the nervous system to catch up to reality." Ryan let out a short breath. "You make it sound like a medical problem." "It is," she replied, "just one that doesn't show up on scans." He stared ahead. I didn't think it would follow me home. It always does, she said. The trick is teaching it where it's allowed to stay. Days later, Ryan was back on base for debriefs when the call came. Not from him, from Commander Marshall. Claire almost didn't answer. Some part of her wanted to preserve the fragile peace she and Ryan were building, but instinct overruled hesitation. "Doc," Marshall said. His voice carried something she recognized immediately, concern stripped of rank. "What happened?" "Nothing official," he said carefully, but Ryan requested a transfer. Claire closed her eyes. "To where?" "Training cadre," Marshall replied. "Temporary, he says he needs time." Claire felt the familiar pull between pride and worry. "And what do you think?" "I think," Marshall said slowly, "that he's carrying something heavy, and I think he trusts you more than he trusts us." Silence stretched. "Will you talk to him?" Marshall asked. "I already am," she said. That night Claire waited up. Ryan came in late, fatigue etched into his face. He froze when he saw her at the table. "You know," he said. "I know," she replied. He dropped into the chair across from her, shoulders sagging. "I didn't want you to hear it from someone else." "I'm glad you asked for time," she said. "That's not weakness." He shook his head. "Feels like quitting." Claire leaned forward, voice steady. "Quitting is pretending you're fine when you're not." Ryan swallowed. "I keep seeing them, the ones we couldn't get to in time." Claire's chest tightened. She let the silence hold them for a moment. "That never goes away completely," she said, "but it gets quieter when you stop fighting it alone." He looked up. "Did you ever think about stopping?" "Yes," she answered without hesitation. "After Afghanistan, after your father." Ryan's eyes searched her face. "Why didn't you?" "Because I realize stopping doesn't mean healing," she said. "It just means changing how you carry it." Weeks passed. Ryan moved into an instructor role, teaching younger candidates navigation and small unit tactics. He struggled at first, frustrated by mistakes that felt too familiar, anger flaring where patience used to be. But slowly, something shifted. One afternoon, Claire watched from a distance as Ryan coached a struggling trainee. His voice was calm, measured. He didn't belittle, he explained, repeated, waited. She felt a swell of something close to hope. That night Ryan admitted it. "Teaching helps," he said. "It reminds me why the details matter." "Because they save lives," Claire said. "Because they save futures," he corrected. She smiled. Then came the call that tested everything. An explosion overseas. Another unit. Another medic down. The hospital buzzed with urgency as names filtered in. Claire felt her body switch modes instantly, calm descending like armor. In the trauma bay, a young corpsman froze mid-procedure, panic flooding his eyes. "Look at me," Claire said firmly. "Breathe, one step at a time." He followed her lead. The patient stabilized. Afterward, the corpsman pulled her aside. "How do you stay so steady?" Claire thought of Ryan, of Fallujah, of a lifetime of controlled chaos. "I don't," she said honestly. "I just don't let fear drive." That night, Ryan showed up unannounced. He'd heard about the incident. "You were back in it," he said. "Yes." "Did it bring things back?" She met his gaze. "It reminded me why I stayed." He nodded slowly. "I think I'm ready to go back," he said. "Not to combat, not yet, but to the teams." Claire felt a familiar knot form. Fear, pride, acceptance. "Then go," she said. "But remember, you don't owe anyone your pain." Months later, Ryan deployed again. This time as a leader. He called when he could, his voice steadier, grounded. "I use your words," he admitted once, "about fear being information." She smiled. "Just don't charge interest." One evening, after a particularly long shift, Claire stood in the locker room staring at her reflection. The tattoo on her arm caught the fluorescent light, no longer hidden, no longer heavy. She realized something then. Exposure hadn't taken her safety. It had given her connection. Ryan came home a year later, changed again, but not broken. Different scars, deeper understanding. They sat together on the porch, silence easy now. "I don't think strength is about surviving anymore," Ryan said thoughtfully. Claire waited. "I think it's about staying open," he continued, "even when it hurts." She nodded. "That's the hardest kind." As the sun dipped below the horizon, Claire felt something settle inside her, a quiet acceptance. She had spent years trying to protect her son from the truth. Now she understood. Truth doesn't destroy. It prepares. And sometimes, the bravest thing a soldier can do is come home and keep going. Why did the phone feel heavier this time, even before it rang? Claire had learned to recognize the warning signs long before sound entered the room. The way the air seemed to tighten. The way her body stilled as if bracing for impact. She was standing at the sink, washing a coffee mug she didn't remember using when the vibration finally came. Not loud, not urgent, just enough. Unknown number. She dried her hands slowly, picked up. "Claire Donovan," she said. There was a pause on the other end, a breath measured too carefully. "This is Lieutenant Harris, Naval Special Warfare," the voice said. "Are you Ryan Donovan's next of kin?" Her chest tightened, but her voice didn't move. "I'm his mother." Another pause, too long. "He's alive," Harris said quickly. "I want to start with that." Claire closed her eyes. Relief came first, sharp and overwhelming. Then the rest followed. "He was injured," Harris continued. "Not physically, at least not in the way you're thinking." Claire leaned against the counter. "Tell me what happened." "He made a call under pressure," Harris said. "A hard one. It saved his team, but it didn't save everyone." The words landed exactly where she knew they would. "He's being evaluated," Harris finished. "He asked for you." That was the part that scared her most. The base hospital smelled the same as every other military hospital she had ever walked into. Sterile, recycled air layered over something metallic and old. Memory clung to places like this. Claire felt it tug at her as she moved through the corridor, past young sailors who tried not to stare but did anyway. Ryan was sitting on the edge of the bed when she entered. No visible wounds, no bandages, just exhaustion carved deep into his face. He looked up and exhaled when he saw her. "You came fast." "I always do," she said, crossing the room. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence wasn't awkward. It was loaded. "I killed someone," Ryan said finally. Claire didn't flinch. She pulled a chair closer and sat, meeting his eyes. "Tell me what you're feeling." He laughed once, bitter. "That's the thing I don't know, relief, shame, anger all at once." She nodded. "That's normal." "I don't feel like it should be," he snapped, then immediately softened. "I mean, I trained for this, I knew the stakes." "And knowing doesn't make it clean," Claire said gently. He stared at his hands. "Everyone keeps telling me I did the right thing, but it doesn't feel right." Claire leaned forward. "Doing the right thing rarely feels good," she said. "If it did, we wouldn't call it sacrifice." Ryan swallowed. "How did you live with it?" The question hung between them. Claire felt its weight settle into old scars. "I didn't," she said honestly. "Not at first. I carried it badly. I drank too much coffee, slept too little, pretended I was fine because everyone needed me to be." He looked up, and then I realized something," she said. "The guilt wasn't punishment, it was proof I still cared." Ryan's eyes filled, and this time he didn't look away. "I'm scared that if I let myself feel it, I won't be able to function." Claire reached for his hand. "You don't have to drown in it," she said, "but you can't outrun it either. You walk with it, slowly, on your terms." The evaluation lasted days. Psych screenings. Conversations that circled the same moments from different angles. Claire stayed nearby, never hovering, never leaving. One afternoon, Ryan asked the question she had been waiting for. "Do you think I should stay in?" he asked. Claire considered him carefully. "Do you want to?" "Yes," he said immediately, then hesitated, but not like before. She nodded, then listened to that. He frowned. "It's not that simple." "No," she agreed, "but it is honest. The board recommended limited duty. No frontline operations for now. Leadership track, advisory roles. Some called it being sidelined. Ryan called it breathing room. Back home, the adjustment was harder than either of them expected. Ryan slept too much or not at all. Loud noises made his shoulders tense. He flinched once when a car backfired, and the look on his face hurt Claire more than any memory. One evening, she found him scrubbing the kitchen counter aggressively. "You're not dirty," she said softly. He froze. "I know." "You don't have to erase anything," she added. "I'm not trying to," he said. "I just need control." She understood that too well. A week later, Ryan surprised her. "I signed up to mentor," he said. "New operators, the ones fresh out of training." Claire raised an eyebrow. "That's a big step." "I know," he said, "but if I can help them make better calls, maybe fewer families get that phone call." Her chest tightened. "That's not how redemption works." He met her gaze. "Maybe not, but it's how purpose does." She smiled faintly. "Fair enough." The first time Claire watched him speak to the trainees, she stayed in the back unnoticed. Ryan stood straighter than she'd seen him in months. His voice was calm, deliberate. "You're going to mess up," he told them. "If anyone here tells you otherwise, they're lying. The goal isn't perfection, it's accountability." Claire felt pride swell quietly, not loud, not sharp, the kind that warmed instead of burned. Later that night, Ryan admitted it. "Talking about it doesn't hurt as much when I'm helping someone else." "That's because pain needs direction," Claire said. Weeks turned into months. Ryan found a rhythm, not peace exactly, but stability. He still had bad days. Claire could tell by the way he withdrew, by the way he went quiet. On those days she didn't push. She sat nearby, cooked, folded laundry, presence instead of pressure. One night Ryan broke the quiet. "Do you ever think about who you were before all this?" he asked. Claire thought of the girl she'd been, eager, certain, untested. "Sometimes," she said, "but I don't miss her." "Why not?" "Because she didn't know how strong she could be," Claire replied. "And neither did I." Ryan nodded slowly. "I don't think I'll ever be who I was before." "No," she said, "but you can be someone you respect." That seemed to settle something in him. Months later, Claire received a letter, handwritten, from one of Ryan's trainees. It thanked her, not by name but by legacy, for raising someone who taught them how to lead without ego, how to carry weight without crushing others. Claire folded the letter carefully and placed it in a drawer she reserved for quiet victories. That night she stood alone in the backyard, stars scattered overhead. The world felt vast and fragile all at once. She thought of the lives Ryan had saved, and the one he couldn't. She understood now what she hadn't fully grasped before. Strength isn't about being untouched by hard choices. It's about choosing to live honestly with the ones that change you. And sometimes, the bravest missions don't happen overseas. They happen inside. Quietly, one day at a time. Why did the moment that finally broke her come so quietly? It wasn't the phone call, not the deployment orders, not the hospital corridors or the nights spent waiting for news that never came. It was a Tuesday afternoon, ordinary in every way, when Claire found herself standing in the supply room at the hospital, unable to remember why she'd walked in. The shelves were stacked neatly: gauze, saline, trauma kits, tools she had trusted with her life for decades. Her hand rested on a box of tourniquets, and suddenly her fingers were shaking. She closed her eyes. "Breathe in, count, breathe out." It didn't work. A memory slipped through the cracks, uninvited and vivid. A boy, younger than Ryan, blood pooling faster than her hands could stop it. The sound of rotor blades too late. The smell. The weight of failure she'd never admitted to carrying. Claire leaned against the metal shelf as the room tilted. This was new. She had always been the steady one, the calm in chaos, the woman people looked to when everything else fell apart. But now her pulse raced, her chest tight, air shallow. For the first time in years, she walked out of a shift early. She sat in her car for almost an hour, forehead resting against the steering wheel, anger bubbling beneath the fear. Not anger at the memory. Anger at herself for letting it surface now, after she'd survived everything else. At home, the house was quiet. Ryan was still on base. Claire poured herself a glass of water she didn't drink and sat at the kitchen table, staring at the grain of the wood like it held answers. She had spent years teaching others how to endure. No one had taught her how to stop. That night sleep didn't come. When it finally did, it brought her back to Fallujah not as it had been but as it felt. Heat, noise, urgency, the crushing certainty that she couldn't save everyone. She woke gasping, heart hammering, the echo of a scream caught in her throat. By morning, the decision was made, though she didn't yet have words for it. She scheduled an appointment. The therapist's office was small and unremarkable. Soft light, neutral walls, a chair that felt too comfortable like it was trying to earn trust too quickly. Claire sat stiffly, hands folded, posture perfect out of habit. "What brings you here?" the therapist asked. Claire almost laughed. "Everything," she said instead. The first session was mostly silence. Claire answered questions carefully, clinically. She described events without emotion, like reading from a report. The therapist didn't interrupt, didn't rush. At the end, she said, "You've been carrying a lot alone." Claire nodded once. That was safe enough. The second session cracked something open. "I don't know who I am without being useful," Claire admitted suddenly. The words surprised her as much as they did the therapist. "What does useful mean to you?" the therapist asked. "Needed," Claire replied. "Necessary." "And if you're not?" Claire hesitated. "Then I'm extra." The word landed hard. She thought of all the times she'd been the extra one, the silent one, the one who stepped back so others could stand forward. At home, Ryan noticed the change before she mentioned therapy. "You're quieter," he said one evening. She smiled faintly. "I'm listening." "To what?" "Myself," she answered. He studied her. "That sounds hard." "It is," she said, "but it's overdue." Weeks passed. Therapy sessions layered gently over old scars, peeling back things Claire had sealed shut out of necessity. Grief she had postponed. Anger she had justified. Guilt she had mistaken for responsibility. One session, the therapist asked, "Do you believe you deserve to survive?" Claire stared at the floor. "I don't know," she said honestly. That answer haunted her. She began to notice how often she dismissed her own pain, how quickly she redirected conversations back to others, how uncomfortable she felt when someone asked how she was and waited for a real answer. Meanwhile, Ryan was changing too. He had found purpose in mentoring, but now he was being asked to do more, to speak, to advocate, to represent something beyond tactics. "They want me to tell my story," he said one night, uneasy, "about the call I made." Claire felt her chest tighten. "Do you want to?" "I think I should," he said, "but I don't want to be defined by it." "You won't be," she said gently. "You'll be contextualized." He gave her a look. "You sound like my therapist." She smiled. "I'm learning." The night before Ryan's first speaking engagement, Claire couldn't sleep. Old fears resurfaced, not for his safety this time, but for his exposure. "Once people know your story," she said quietly, "they'll make assumptions." Ryan nodded. "They already do." He paused. "I get why you hid now." Claire swallowed. I'm sorry you had to find out this way. He shook his head. I'm not. It made me feel less alone. That mattered more than she could say. At the event, Claire sat in the back, unseen. Ryan stood at the podium, voice steady but unguarded. He spoke of hesitation, of consequence, of living with decisions that can't be undone. There was no applause at the end, just silence, the good kind. Afterward, a young woman approached him, eyes wet. My brother didn't come home, she said, but hearing you talk, it helped. Ryan didn't know what to say. He didn't need to. On the drive home, he was quiet. I don't feel lighter, he admitted, but I feel truer. Claire nodded. That's how healing starts. Later that week, Claire's therapist asked her to write a letter. To who? Claire asked. To yourself, the therapist replied, from the version of you that survived. The exercise felt ridiculous, then impossible, then necessary. Claire wrote slowly, about endurance, about fear, about the cost of being strong all the time, about the right to rest. She cried halfway through and didn't stop. That night, she placed the letter in the same drawer as Ryan's trainee's note. Not trophies. Proof. One evening, as they sat together on the porch, Ryan broke the quiet. I don't think I ever asked you this, he said. Do you forgive yourself? Claire watched the sun dip below the horizon, thought of all the lives, all the moments she had replayed endlessly. I'm learning too, she said. He nodded, me too. The air cooled, the world slowed. For the first time in a long while, Claire felt something unfamiliar settle in her chest. Not relief. Permission. Because strength isn't only about holding the line. Sometimes it's about finally letting yourself step back and trusting that you're still worthy when you do. Why did peace arrive only after she stopped chasing it? The morning light crept softly through the kitchen window, resting on the same table where so many hard conversations had unfolded. Claire sat there with a mug warming her hands, untouched for several minutes. The house was quiet in a way that no longer felt fragile. It felt earned. Ryan was asleep upstairs, for once truly asleep. No packing, no restless movement echoing down the hallway, just stillness. Claire breathed it in. This was new territory, not happiness in the loud, celebratory sense people talked about, something quieter, deeper, a steadiness that didn't demand vigilance. She thought about how long it had taken to get here. Years of running toward emergencies, years of defining herself by usefulness, by response time, by how much pain she could absorb without letting it show. Even after leaving the battlefield, she had stayed in combat, just a different kind. Trauma bays, broken bodies, other people's worst days stacked endlessly on her own. And now, for the first time, she wasn't bracing for impact. Later that morning, her phone buzzed, a message from Ryan. Coffee later, just us. She smiled. They met at a small cafe near the water, the kind of place that didn't rush you. Ryan arrived first, already seated, shoulders relaxed in a way she still noticed every time. You look lighter, he said as she sat down. Claire tilted her head. So do you. He nodded, fingers wrapped around his cup. I slept through the night. She didn't hide her relief. That's not a small thing. No, he agreed, it's not. They talked easily at first. Ordinary things, the weather, a new trainee Ryan was mentoring, a nurse Claire had been guiding through her first critical case. Life unfolding without drama. Then Ryan grew quiet. I made a decision, he said. Claire felt the familiar instinct to prepare herself, but it never fully arrived. Okay. I'm staying in, he said, but not chasing the front line anymore. I want to build, teach, change things where I can. She studied his face, searching for hesitation. There was none, just clarity. That sounds like you, she said. He exhaled. It took me a while to believe that stepping back didn't mean stepping down. Claire smiled softly. I know. Ryan hesitated. You helped me see that. She shook her head gently. You did the work. They sat with that for a moment, the truth of it settling comfortably between them. A week later, Claire stood in front of a room she never expected to face. Not a ceremony, not a hospital, a classroom. Rows of young corpsmen in training watched her carefully, some with curiosity, some with guarded respect. She hadn't planned on speaking. She had been invited, encouraged, nudged. She almost said no. But something in her, stronger than fear, quieter than pride, had said yes. She didn't introduce herself with titles, didn't list deployments. She spoke simply. I'm here to talk about what happens after, she said. That got their attention. She spoke about pressure, about responsibility, about the illusion that being strong meant being unbreakable. She told them the truth she wished someone had told her earlier. You will save lives, she said, and some days you won't, both will change you. She paused, letting it land. The goal isn't to come out untouched, it's to come out honest. When she finished, there was no applause, just thoughtful silence. Later, a young medic approached her, voice uncertain. Ma'am, how do you know when you've done enough? Claire considered the question carefully. When you stop asking if you should have done more, she said, and start asking how to live with what you did. That night she told Ryan about it. He listened intently, pride quiet but unmistakable. You're doing it again, he said. Doing what? Building something, he replied. She hadn't thought of it that way, but he was right. Months passed. Life continued uneventfully, beautifully so. Claire reduced her hours at the hospital, not because she couldn't handle it, but because she no longer needed to prove that she could. She spent more time mentoring, less time absorbing. Ryan moved into a formal training leadership role. His evaluation spoke of calm authority, of empathy without softness, of decisions made with clarity rather than ego. They still had hard days. Healing wasn't linear. Some nights were restless. Some memories refused to stay buried. But now, neither of them carried it alone. One evening, they stood together at Trident Bay, not for a graduation, just a walk along the edge of the field where it had all shifted. Ryan broke the silence. I used to think that day was about you, he said. The tattoo, the story, everything coming out. Claire glanced at him. But now I think it was about permission, he continued, for both of us. She nodded slowly. I think you're right. Permission to be seen, permission to change, permission to carry the weight differently. Ryan smiled faintly. I don't feel like I have to earn my place anymore. Claire felt something loosen in her chest. Neither do I. As the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the quiet ground, Claire thought about how close she had come to staying hidden forever, how fear had disguised itself as protection, how silence had felt safer than truth. She understood now that resilience wasn't about endurance alone. It was about adaptation, about knowing when to run forward and when to finally stop. That night, Claire stood in her bedroom, looking at the framed photo on her dresser. Ryan in uniform, his father beside him, smiling in a way that only existed in memory now. She touched the frame gently. We're okay, she whispered. And for the first time, she truly believed it. Because some battles don't end with victory or defeat. They end with understanding. With the quiet decision to live fully, even with the scars. And sometimes, the strongest legacy isn't the one written into records or etched into skin. It's the courage to step out of the shadows, to let truth breathe, and to choose dignity over silence. Because real strength doesn't announce itself. It simply keeps going.